A few years ago, I helped start up and run a family business. We introduced an innovative business model in the industry that we were in, and we made it a relative success. So when I talk about things like project management, business models, and all the related skills, I kind of have a good sense of what I'm talking about. Recently, I saw an article on Forbes written by Paul Tassi entitled "Predicting the Biggest Video Game Disaster of 2014, The Elder Scrolls Online." I'll leave you a link in the description below so you can go read the article yourselves. But essentially the article is talking about The Elder Scrolls Online and its choice in business model being the subscription-based model. Paul starts off the article talking about how there was a rumour that The Elder Scrolls Online had a budget of around $200 million, which is around what is estimated that the Old Republic had as well. He goes on a little bit to talk about why he thinks the Star Wars The Old Republic was considered a flop in the MMO industry and why that it was due to the subscription-based model that the Old Republic launched with. He then goes on to draw the comparison that even a brand like the Star Wars The Old Republic, which had a massive video game cult following thanks to its previous installments being Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2, even those followings weren't enough to save the game. He states that even though Elder Scrolls is a beloved franchise, it doesn't have the pull of a Star Wars brand, and thus ZeniMax are falling into the same old traps as BioWare and EA did. He says, and I quote, "But even Star Wars wasn't enough to convince the Old Republic players that the game was worth a monthly fee. The MMO didn't bring much new to the table, and soon the game started to leak players. Eventually, it was forced to admit defeat and go free to play. The game still exists in that form today, but instead of being the blockbuster EA needed it to be, it's a cautionary tale of overestimating your brand. And that seems to be exactly what's happening with The Elder Scrolls Online." Now the article goes on to talk a little bit about knowing your audience and saying that Elder Scrolls players traditionally prefer single player games because that's the way they've had their Elder Scrolls in the past, and that he thinks, in his opinion, that Elder Scrolls players prefer that single player experience and no one was asking for an MMO. What interests me more about this article isn't the focus on the Elder Scrolls Online, it's actually the focus on the subscription-based model. Now here's what interested me, and I quote, "The gold rush is over. MMOs as a genre may not be dead yet, but the monthly subscription model certainly is for new entries. And Bethesda and ZeniMax were foolish not to have the foresight to realise this. While it's entirely possible TESO is released and it blows everyone's expectations away, that's seemingly increasingly unlikely as players have already spent a lot of time with the game and many more are coming away less than impressed. It was a strange decision to jump from genres from a famed single player series to an MMO, and even stranger to expect fans to pay $15 a month for the privilege." Now putting the Elder Scrolls to one side just for a moment, this kind of viewpoint on the subscription-based model is very, very curious. In fact, I find it remarkably interesting. Now, we all know that we've seen a massive rise in the free-to-play model in recent years, and the free-to-play model is something, in my opinion, that can work, but it is so rarely done correctly and without an exploitative framework of monetization. For me, games industries, and especially big game industry companies, cannot be trusted with the monetization of content without becoming exploitive to the consumer. We've seen it time and time again of companies exploiting customers' families. It happens over and over. Speaking as a consumer, I have always preferred the subscription-based model over any other form of model for MMOs. People need to realise that massive multiplayer online games aren't just games, they are services. The subscription-based model allows for you to get the best value for your money. And not only this, not only does it provide the best value for money, but it is possibly the most consumer-friendly way of doing things currently. I would rather pay $15 a month to an MMO, knowing that any content that comes out is mine to access straight away without them nickel and diming me every which way. Even more recently, Ryan Dancy, CEO of Pathfinder's online developer Goblinworks, sprung to the defence of TESO's choice in subscription-based model. And he went and wrote a piece on MMORPG.com, and I'll also leave a link in the description below for that article too. In that article, he basically alludes to microtransaction revenue doesn't even touch the size of subscription revenue. He provides a table of estimates by gathering information from various sources, including press releases, official documents, talking to industry insiders, and looking at other anecdotal evidence. As you can see, there is some really interesting stats here. Now, obviously, you have to bear in mind that these are actually estimates, but they are pretty accurate estimates in my opinion. For example, take Star Wars: The Republic there, which I'm a subscriber of. The estimated subscribers is 500,000, which is about right because that is what was alluded to last year by one of the BioWare developers. Now, if you're estimating that sub price at $15, that's an estimated monthly revenue of $7.5 million a month just in subscribers alone. Take World of Warcraft, for example, another example. Now, World of Warcraft is, my opinion, is difficult to compare to because of it is a phenomenon in the games industry that will never be repeated. World of Warcraft came at a time where it was perfect for that type of MMO. It'd never been really done before in that way, and it was something that just captured the imagination of millions. And I don't think that World of Warcraft's success in the MMO industry will ever be repeated again. I think it was very much like a viral video. It's just a one-off. It was a convolution of circumstances that just can't be repeated. But if you take a look at their estimates here, they're looking at around 3.5 million subscribers paying $15 a month. So you're looking at around $52.5 million per month. That's not too bad. Although these stats are estimates, I would say they're probably some of the most accurate estimates that you're going to get without the actual figures coming from the developers themselves. In the games industry, we do hear developers crying poverty a lot, and I honestly believe a lot of these cries are unfounded. The fact is, if you can't make a phenomenal game with a budget of $200 million, then you need to seriously consider what career you're in. Because if you can't do that with that kind of budget, there is something severely wrong with either the company or with your ability. The biggest reason games companies leak money during development, in my opinion, is down to two major things. One is business acumen, the other is project management. Keeping to things like your budget, your time scales, making sure that your overheads are as low as possible are essential in any form of business. Just because you're making a video game doesn't change the fact that you're trying to make a profit. These essential key principles seem to be forgotten almost universally in the games industry today. Now, bringing back Elder Scrolls back in for a moment, I do agree with Tassi that TISO may flop, but I disagree with the reasons that he alludes to why it will flop. I'm not only tired of people running around saying that the subscription model is dead, but I'm actually flabbergasted why consumers and players aren't crying out for new MMOs that come into the industry, why they aren't crying out for the subscription model to return, as it is the best form for them. I do think, however, MMOs should have a free-to-play option built within them. I just don't think it should be monetized as it is. I think you should have a free-to-play option for people who can't afford a subscription, so they do get to play with their friends, but I think it should be limited so they don't have access to all the content in that game without paying for it. I could go on for hours for the reasons I think that the Old Republic failed in its first year, and I would say that mine are closer to being right than Paul Tassi's are, and I know for one thing is for sure that it wasn't because they had a subscription model. The simple fact is, MMOs don't fail because of a subscription model. MMOs fail because they release without enough endgame content. They often have massive PvE, PvP content issues, balancing issues, all array of things. In fact, forgetting all that for one moment, your game fails for one reason above all else. Your game is not good enough to hold players. Fact. Admittedly, gamers do have high standards, and admittedly, sometimes they are too high. But at the end of the day, if gamers are leaving your game, it isn't because you're charging them $15 a month. It's because they feel that they can't justify that $15 a month in that game because that game is not holding them. They're not playing it. They don't want to play it because it's not good enough. If you want players to pay $15 a month, continually play your game, be loyal customers and fans, plan and build your content better. Gamers will happily pay $15 a month for a good game. They just won't pay to log in and do nothing. In terms of the Elder Scrolls Online, in my opinion, if it does flop, which it may well might, it's not because of the price tag, it's because it wasn't good enough to keep the players in the game. I'll leave the links in the description below for the articles I've mentioned today. Do let me know what you think is going to happen with the Elder Scrolls Online this year. Let me know what you prefer in terms of, if you're an MMO player, what do you prefer? Do you prefer the subscription model, or do you prefer a highly monetized free-to-play model, a buy-to-play model? What do you prefer? As always, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.